everyone, and good evening. Welcome to the Linglobe channel. This time, we'll be bringing you content about preserving the world's languages for the future. Please enjoy it to the end.
When we think of survival, we usually think of a bunker. Like we think of thick walls, stockpiled supplies, and just, keeping the extreme elements out. Linglobe. Today, we're exploring a group of people who do the exact opposite. They survive not by hiding from the elements, but by moving directly through them.
Right. We were talking about the Nenets people. They're this indigenous nomadic group in the Russian Arctic. And, our modern instinct is to insulate ourselves, like create these climate-controlled environments. But for the Nenets, the freezing cold isn't some obstacle. It's actually the literal foundation of their entire existence.
Yeah, and Linglobe, we're going to walk you through a really fascinating presentation to see exactly how they manage this. We've got 15 slides to cover, going over their survival mechanics, a totally unique language, and their profound spiritual connection to the natural world. So let's jump right in. In slide 1, we see the title, Sparks Against the Snow, the Language, Culture, and Resilience of the Yamal Nomads. Just that imagery, a spark against the snow, it really paints a vivid picture of vitality in this punishing landscape.
It really does. And in slide 2, we start to see the scale of that vitality. We're looking at a population of about 30,000 active language speakers who just call themselves the people. But the environment they inhabit, it truly tests the limits of biology. They operate across the tundra, where winter temperatures routinely plummet below minus 40 degrees Celsius.
Minus 40. At that point, the moisture in your breath actually freezes before it hits the ground.
Exactly. It's basically like living inside an industrial flash freezer.
Which is wild. And what blows my mind is that they don't just scrape by. They build their core pillars around that ice reindeer herding, oral traditions, and intense spiritual ties to nature. But to preserve a culture that distinct, you'd have to be geographically isolated to an extreme degree.
Oh, absolutely. And to understand the sheer scale of that isolation, in slide 3, we can trace their territory on the map. They operate across these vast, remote expanses like the Taimyr Peninsula, the Arkhangelsk Oblast, the Komi Republic. And the presentation puts this into global perspective by mapping travel times from major hubs.
Yeah, looking at this, you're looking at 25 to 33 hours of continuous travel from New York. 24 to 32 hours from Tokyo.
Right, and up to 38 hours from Sydney, and that's assuming you can even secure passage on the regional ice roads.
So they basically exist in this highly preserved subarctic bubble. But looking at the historical timeline, in slide 4, that isolation wasn't, entirely impenetrable. The foundation is what the slide calls deep Arctic roots, which is millennia of adaptation. Then we see imperial contact in the 13th century.
Yeah, where they were integrated as tributaries.
Right. But the most massive shift happens in the 20th century under cultural pressure during the Soviet era. The slide impartially lists policies like forced sedentarization and Russification efforts.
Yeah, sedentarization was a massive administrative shift. The Soviet state mandated that nomadic groups settle into permanent villages. So they introduced centralized education and administration to replace a lifestyle that was entirely based on following seasonal reindeer migrations.
Just a total structural clash, basically.
Exactly, a clash between a static bureaucratic system and a mobile land-based culture. But look at the final block on that timeline. Following the 1990s to the present, the presentation notes a cultural thaw. We see this really active revival of the Nenets language, their animistic religion, and cultural education.
It's incredible. They absorbed centuries of geopolitical pressure, plus some of the harshest climates on Earth, and still bounced back. And the secret to that resilience seems to be in how ingeniously they structure their everyday lives. So, in slide 5, the presentation breaks down the mechanics of the Chum tent.
Right, the traditional dwelling.
Yeah, it's a conical wooden frame wrapped tightly in reindeer hides. But I was wondering, why a cone? Like a dome or a box seems so much easier to build.
Well, the conical shape is an absolute architectural necessity. When you're out on the flat tundra, Arctic winds can hit hurricane speeds. A cone provides zero flat surfaces for the wind to catch, so the blizzards just wrap around the structure rather than pushing it over.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and inside that perimeter, they survive the cold using these layered militia garments and pima boots. They're engineered to trap body heat while wicking away sweat.
And right in the center of that tent is the hearth, which brings up their diet. They eat raw reindeer meat, blood, and Arctic fish like muksun. Now, eating raw meat and drinking blood sounds incredibly intense to modern ears. But there's a biological reason for this, isn't there?
Absolutely there is. In a frozen wasteland where absolutely no fruits or vegetables grow, getting vitamins is literally a matter of life and death. Raw reindeer blood and fresh raw meat are dense in vitamin C.
Wow.
Yeah, and cooking the meat destroys that vitamin. So by consuming it raw, the Nenets entirely bypass the threat of scurvy. It's a closed loop of nutritional survival.
That is brilliant. The environment dictates the diet entirely. And the slide also notes that their social fabric is patrilineal, so lineage goes through the male line, but survival requires total partnership. Like, women are the primary architects of the Chum tent, managing the logistics of moving camp.
Alongside essential roles in herding, yeah.
Exactly. But the anchor of this whole system, the thing that provides the tent, the clothes, the food, is the reindeer. Which brings us to the next point. In slide 6, we explore the dual nature of the reindeer. It's the sole provider of physical survival, but the presentation also labels it a sacred conduit.
Which is such a fascinating concept.
I have a hard time wrapping my head around it, honestly. How can the exact same animal be your mundane daily meal, the literal roof over your head, and also a holy sacrament? In most religions, sacred things are strictly kept away from everyday utility.
Right, but you have to view this through the lens of Nenets animism. In their worldview, there is no dividing line between the physical and the spiritual. They revere the spirits of fire, the animals, and the land itself. So the reindeer acts as the hinge connecting the natural and supernatural worlds.
So eating it is spiritual.
Exactly. When they consume the reindeer, they aren't just eating, they are partaking in a spiritual exchange with the tundra. For them, the very act of survival is the sacrament.
The physical and the spiritual are just completely merged. I love that.
Yeah.
So the reindeer connects them to the land, but the presentation makes it clear that it's their language that connects them to their ancestors. Let's look at the linguistic roots. In slide 7, we see the Uralic language family tree.
Yeah, and the Nenets language belongs to the Samoyedic branch.
Which is wild because looking at the chart, it shares deep ancestral roots with Finnish, Estonian, and Hungarian, yet it remains this distinct linguistic isolate.
Right, it's one of the oldest unbroken branches. And in slide 8, we get into the vocal mechanics of how they actually speak. The language uses strict vowel harmony and what the slide calls highly complex morphological word formation.
Right, so instead of stringing separate words together, they basically stack prefixes and suffixes onto a single root word. It's like linguistic Lego. You build one massive, highly specific word that conveys an entire scene.
The complexity of that grammar is just staggering. But look at the written architecture section on that same slide. Traditionally, the Nenets possessed absolutely no writing system. None.
Wait, really? None at all?
Not until the 20th century. That's when linguists engineered an adapted Cyrillic alphabet specifically to capture their unique phonetic sounds.
But wait, if they had no writing system for thousands of years, how did they preserve a language with such intricate rules? Usually, without text to anchor it, languages just drift or simplify over time.
That's the amazing part. In slide 9, we see how they pulled off this impossible feat. Oral storytelling was the unbroken chain. Without a written alphabet, their stories functioned as mnemonic memory palaces.
So they lock the data into the stories.
Exactly. The epics contain vital data about migratory routes, weather patterns, and survival techniques, all locked into the rhythm of the spoken word. The language is revered as a sacred force, directly tethering the people to their environment.
And today, they heavily defend this sacred force. The slide notes they use targeted teaching in schools, children's literature, and regional radio to keep it active. And in slide 10, the presentation actually provides a vocabulary list so we can see the phonetics.
Yeah, pronouncing these words really gives you a visceral sense of the culture's rhythm.
Let me try a few. The greeting for hello is hasava. For good night, it's hasava siata. And for thank you, it is numaleta.
Just making those sounds, it feels like cracking a highly sophisticated code that has withstood thousands of freezing winters without ever being written down. And this language is entirely woven into their daily joy, too. It isn't just for solemn ceremonies. It is the absolute foundation of their entertainment.
Which brings us to their recreation. In slide 11, we get a look at their winter celebrations and games. We see Ngartak, which is reindeer sled racing. Then there's toy hunting with miniature bows and a precision furball toss. But my favorite is definitely the frozen fish slide.
Oh, that one is great.
It's an accuracy game where they slide actual frozen fish across the ice. But I have to ask, aren't they worried about bruising their dinner? Using your food as sports equipment seems like a massive risk when calories are so scarce.
Well, you have to remember the temperature. At minus 40 degrees, a frozen muksun fish is essentially a block of granite. It isn't going to bruise or spoil.
Oh, right. It's basically a rock.
Exactly. The ice acts as a frictionless playing field, and the frozen fish is the most aerodynamic object they have. It perfectly demonstrates how their play is adapted to the environment.
That makes perfect sense. But while those physical games train the body, in slide 12, we learn that the ultimate test of skill is mental. The slide calls it the competition of words.
Right. We're talking about oral epic recitations. At these gatherings, mastering the Nenets language in these complex epics is treated as high art, but also as a fierce communal sport.
It's like an intellectual decathlon.
Even deeper than that. If you think about it in modern terms, their language is essentially a living blockchain. Every time a storyteller recites an epic perfectly during these games, the entire community is collectively verifying and backing up their history, laws, and survival knowledge.
I love that analogy. The community is the server. And this interconnected worldview where the reindeer, the cold, and the language all support each other is captured so beautifully in their imagery. In slide 13, we look at the visual iconography. The presentation shows these traditional blue, white, and red geometric patterns on clothing and banner.
Yeah, and the official flag.
Right. And this formal heraldry ties the state identity right back to the sacred reindeer antlers, the Chum tents, and the shamanic drum.
It is a striking visual synthesis. Everything is connected. In slide 14, the presentation provides this poetic summary of the entire ecosystem. It says, the Nenets people carry the warmth of stories across frozen lands. Through language, reindeer, and song, they protect an Arctic world where every word is a spark against the snow.
A spark against the snow. That perfectly sets up our final takeaway. In slide 15, we are presented with the living Samoyedic voice. The ultimate point here is that despite the intense geopolitical shifts of the 20th century and that brutal climate, the Nenets are not a relic of the past.
No, not at all. They are a vibrant, living culture.
Exactly. With roughly 30,000 active speakers, the ongoing efforts in indigenous education ensure that the oldest branch of the Uralic tree is going to continue to thrive in the Yamal tundra.
You know, the Nenets offer such an incredible reflection on how we store our own knowledge today. In our modern world, we rely almost entirely on external hard drives, cloud servers, and written text to hold our history. We have completely outsourced our memory to machines.
We really have.
But the Nenets remind us that the human mind, when it's deeply tied to a community and a natural environment, is capable of preserving complex history, intricate art, and sacred traditions for millennia using nothing but the spoken word. It makes you realize just how much inherent human resilience we might have lost by outsourcing our memory to the digital ether.
Thank you for watching until the end. We will continue to bring you many more languages from around the world. Please subscribe to our channel. See you next time on the Linglobe channel.